Good morning, everyone. I hope you all are ready with the next session. In our previous session, we started discussing about Spring Framework, where you understand what is the Spring Framework, why this Spring Framework is very popular and very powerful compared to other frameworks in Java. Then you came across different advantages of the Spring Framework, where I clearly explained each and every pinpoint in detail in order to make you understand why Spring is very popular in the market and why it is being used by many of the software people or many of the industries in order to design any Java application. And while I'm discussing this, where I compared this Spring framework with Hibernate 2, I hope you people got complete clarity on understanding its popularity. Still, you can refer to the recording of the previous lecture if you miss, unfortunately, or still if you want to have some kind of revision to understand what exactly this Spring framework is all about. So in our today's session, I'm going to start our Spring architecture. In order to work on any framework, in order to design application based on a specific framework, it's very important to understand the architecture of that particular framework. I hope you people are familiar with a framework called Hibernate, which you have studied during your CO1, where you understand the way you have implemented almost all your Hibernate applications. Because of you understand the architecture of Hibernate, you know how to write or how to implement any kind of or you can call it as an application using Hibernate. I hope you remember the architecture of Hibernate too, where architecture of Hibernate will have three layers, where one layer is the layer where Java application resides. What I mean to say is the the piece of code or wherever you start defining your Java code will resides in one layer, and then you will have another layer in that particular architecture saying as Hibernate layer, and at last you'll have one more layer where you'll have a database there. In order to make your application to interact with a database, you need to use an Hibernate framework which resides in a layer called Hibernate layer so that your Java application can start interacting with a database. And you know what this Hibernate layer will consist of. This will take care of having the configuration files as well as your mapping files. Because of you understand this particular architecture, you wrote many examples and you wrote many programs, or I hope to design small applications too, where if you want to design any application using Hibernate, you need to have four files as must and should. One is Pozo class, and the next one is configuration file, and the next one is mapping file, and I need to define my logic file stating as a Java application where all these four files will help me to interact with a database. And you understand all this because of you understand the architecture of what Hibernate. In the similar way, it's very important to understand the architecture of any framework before you want to start working on the same architecture. I want you people to understand what this Spring architecture will consist of. Before we start writing for three key points with respect to this architecture, I want you people to understand this architecture consists of several modules such as inversion of control. The purpose of this inversion of control you will understand. The next topic, whenever I start teaching dependency injection and inversion of control, in order to inject dependencies, I need to have inversion of control. Why I need to inject dependencies and all we'll understand in the next topic. But I want you to understand this consists of several modules such as inversion of control, DAO. What I mean to say is data access objects in Spring. Almost all the times I'll call it as data access objects, where I'll start accessing the data which is in a database via an object. It includes even aspect oriented programming too. It includes OR. It will have FMVC, it will have beans, it will have codes. It consists of many modules. You'll feel comfortable if you look into the diagram of this thing. So I'll show you the diagram of how this architecture looks. You can refer to any internet website so that you may get this architecture from anywhere. I want you people to look into the diagram which I'm going to share. Like this is the way how the Spring architecture will looks like. You'll have one module, or better I can call it as that particular modules which belongs for the purpose of testing is available in a kind of group called test group. So this particular block is only for the purpose to be tested. And the next one is core container, where this is the place where you will have, because of Spring completely deals with bean every time. It consists of all the core related modules, bean modules, context and everything. When I start writing the program, you'll understand in a better way. To integrate with a database, in order to interact with a database, you can interact using JDBC. You can interact using any ORM tool like Hibernate and all. Those are the topics which you are going to see one after the other, because of I gave you the list of topics where you can see one topic name saying as Spring with JDBC, one topic name saying as Spring with ORM, or I can call it as Spring with uh, Hibernate. In such a way, I clearly told using this Spring, I can able to build an application which is a console application where my application can interact with a database. In the similar way, I can design an application where I can able to build as a web application. In order to build a web application, I can use a container called web, where I can use servlets there, where I can use JSP there, where I can use structs there, filters there. Many technologies I have. That's the reason why I told using this Spring framework or using this particular Spring architecture, developer can able to build an application which is of console application where you can interact with a database. In the similar way, you can able to also build a web application. Know the difference between a console application and web application. A web application is something like you can on a web server, you can able to look into anything on a web page, whereas your console applications are the one which everything happens on the console. Is it clear? So this is architecture. In fact, you can't remember each and everything in architecture, but by looking into this, you need to understand what architecture consists of. Okay, so this is what an architecture is. I hope everyone is ready with your lecture notes and everything, as I clearly said in the first class itself. We'll write two or three key points in order to understand what the Spring architecture is. Right now, this Spring architecture consists of several modules, several modules such as IOC inversion of control. If you want to write its full form too, you can write inversion of control, and it consists of a block called DAO. In fact, I have shown that where you'll have where it's supposed you to integrate with database. So data access objects, AOP. It includes some aspect oriented programming. As we all know what is object oriented programming. As of now, it may look like new for everyone. What is aspect oriented programming? I'll let you know. Don't get worried. The next one, it consists of an OR. Even you'll have one block or one module stating as web MVC, or to create a web application where I'll follow architectural MVC. And you have came across your code, your beans, your context, and in the similar you have one group test event, etc. Better not mention this test, etc. Just you need to understand what Spring framework consists of, or else you can call in such a what Spring it's for us who will be called as a developers in order to design any application using Spring framework. Whatever the modules I discussed so far, which are the part of a Spring, I want you people to understand how these are into. All these modules are grouped into. All these modules are grouped into test. I hope you people have gone through the diagram. You can refer to internet in order to have this diagram. I'll show you for one more time. One is test. And what is the next one? Spring core container. So I can call it as core container. What is the next one? All those are grouped into AOOP. All this comes under aspect oriented programming. So I can call it as AOOP. And the next one, in order to deal with a database, I call it as DAO, data access object. So grouped into DAO, then grouped into WebMVC. This is what I want everyone to understand. All these modules are what you have in Spring are grouped into these ways. One is test, and the next one is core container, aspect-oriented programming, data access object, WebMVC to design web application. I want you people to understand where I expect you people to write tasks, refer to diagram, where you can refer to any of the website in order to understand this architecture. That what I am showing right now. This is your architecture. If people are having a habit of writing and lecture notes, I hope you people can have this diagram at a later stage. By referring to internet, you can able to get this diagram from multiple sources. And these are the key points which I want you people to write from architecture. I'll wait for 30 seconds of time. As I clearly told, even though it is streaming in YouTube, uh, because of YouTube takes very less buffer, where you feel comfortable to uh, go through the online class without any interruption. That's the reason why I made it as YouTube Live. But still, I want you people to understand. We'll make this class as completely a kind of physical class where you get a feel like you are in a physical class rather than simply an online class. Online class is somewhat different, come with a lot of ready-made things in order to utilize. But I want you people to understand that just make it as just you are in a physical class where you are doing things along with me in parallel. So I'll wait for 30 minutes of 30 seconds of time where I expect you people to write these two key points and refer to the diagram. The next topic, which is the most important topic from Spring, if you understand this, you feel very comfortable toward this entire framework, which we are calling it as a Spring. Is it clear? So the next one is Spring dependency injection. You can call it a Spring DA, or else you can name it as dependency injection. I'm going topic by topic the way I listed in my first session. I hope you remember all the topics which I listed. I gave you the list of 11 different concepts where I expect every student to be very strong in all the levels so that you feel comfortable at any point of time, build a web application or build any kind of application or even to speak with someone regarding the Spring framework with the is that what you are going to take care. The first one is introduction. The second topic is why Spring. The third topic is advantages of Spring. The fourth topic is Spring architecture till where we completed. The next one is your fifth topic is dependency injection. Your sixth topic is inversion of control. Your seventh topic is primitive data types and non-primitive data types. Then your eighth topic is where I'll teach you how to integrate this JDBC with the Spring in order to interact with a database. That what we are seeing in this diagram. To access a data in a database, I need to use JDBC in Spring framework. So the next topic is Spring with JDBC. Then the next topic is Spring with ORM or Spring with Hibernate. Hibernate is an ORM tool, as everyone knows. Then I'll teach you Spring MVC so that you can able to start designing web application. Then the last topic is where I'll teach you Spring Web MVC using Hibernate in order to design a web application. So I hope you got some clarity on what topics you are going to study in detail, which is nothing but what are the topics which you have in architecture. If you understand everything, you feel so comfortable to start writing any kind of a program, or you feel so comfortable to design an application. So right now, the next one is dependency injection, which is one of the most important topics from Spring. I let you know why it understand this dependency injection. Is it clear? First of all, I want you to understand what this dependency injection is. Just give me a 30 seconds time. Fine. First of all, I want you to understand what this dependency injection is. It is one of the design pattern which is used to remove the dependencies from a program. Sir, what do you mean by dependencies in a program? If the program is having dependencies, how should I remove those dependencies? And what happens if the program consisting of dependencies and whether it is good or not? What about all these dependencies you are going to understand right now? Is it clear? So what I'll do, I want everyone to understand two different situations where assume that I have a small program. In a similar way, I want to design an application. Assume that I came across two situations where my program is having dependencies and the other one is where my program don't have any dependencies. So I'll consider it as no dependencies. In the similar way, whenever I start designing my application have dependencies in one case. So what are dependencies? I'll explain. Don't get worried. In the other case, where my application don't have any dependencies, so I'm calling it as no dependencies. Sir, should I have an application or a program having dependencies or having no dependencies? Say, I want everyone from the class to understand must be take care that your program should never have any kind of dependencies. And I let you know what is the disadvantage of having dependencies in your program or either in your application. Assume that we as a team build an application where the application is having dependencies in the same. See, the advantage of having dependencies in the application or either in the program, if it is an application where my application was designed in such a way where it consists of lot of dependencies, if any one of the dependency fails, if it, see, assume in such a way where your application will have many components, is it clear? If any of the component fails because of one component is depending on the other component because of you design code in such a way, there is a chance where my entire application may get failed. I hope you got my point. Whereas application always deals with many components. You may not have only a single component when you design an application. If I design my application in such a way where every component is depending on the other component, unfortunately, if one component fails, there is a chance where my entire application may get failed. Whereas if I start designing my application in such a way where there is no dependencies between the components that what I have in the application, if one component fails there may be a there may be a chance where only one functionality may stop in an application, where the rest of the application works pretty fine. I hope you understand my point. So it's very important being a developer to take care. Your application should not have any dependencies. What I mean to say, the components that what you have in your application should not have any kind of dependencies in order not to have the failure rate much. If you don't have dependencies, if one component fails, obviously a part of an application may get fails, but rest of the things remain same. I hope you got my point. The same in the case of program. If if I have multiple programs, if one is depending on the other one, if one program fails, there is no case where the other program gets executed. In the similar way, if I have programs in such a way where one program never depends on the other program, if one program fails, it was pretty fine. It will never make any kind of harm to other programs. So it's our responsibility to make sure either a program or application should not have any dependencies in order to run that application pretty fine even though a single component fails. So now what I want you people to understand, if your application or if your program is having any kind of dependencies, we need to remove those dependencies in order to make our program works pretty fine. Sir, how can I remove those dependencies if I come to know whether my program our application consists of dependencies? I want you people to understand this is what your dependency injection will do. If people ask you what is a dependency injection, I want you people to understand right now dependency injection is a design pattern which are used to remove what dependencies from a program, or you can call it as from application. Both are fine. Why I need to remove dependencies? If I have dependencies, there is much chance for a failure of my whole application because of one is depending on the other. If I remove those dependencies, as everything is independent, whereas my failure rate will be very less. Is it clear? So it's developer responsibility to make sure we don't have any dependencies in the program. If our program consists of dependencies, we need to remove those dependencies using dependency injection. So right now, dependency injection is a design pattern. Dependency injection is a design pattern which is used to remove what dependencies from the program. Remove dependencies from the program. Sir, what happens if you remove the dependencies? As I said that it as my program executes pretty fine, I can write in such a way. This makes our code easier to maintain and test. If there is no failure in my application, obviously being a developer, it will be easy for to maintain as well as it will be easy to test your application even if you don't have any kind of dependencies. So this makes your code easier to test and maintain. So because of you, with the help of scenario, I want everyone to write this as a scenario too. Like just a small scenario to make you understand what is dependencies and what happens no dependencies. Dependencies, make sure you don't have any dependencies. See, as I told that if you don't have any dependencies, your application or program works pretty fine. Spring framework, this is a key point which I want everyone from the class to understand. Your spring framework was designed in such a way it allows you to write a code only with no dependencies. Sir, how can I come to know whether my code is having no dependencies? See, being a developer, we can't know how to write a code using only using like code with no dependencies. Is it clear? So even though your code is having dependencies, we'll understand how to remove those dependencies so that your code will be converted into no dependencies. Now, the reason why I explained this scenario, I want you people to understand the program where you have dependencies will be called as tightly coupled program. Tightly coupled program. I hope you got my point. So Spring will not allow you to have a program which is tightly coupled. What I mean to say, where program will have dependencies. Spring allows us to write a program which is only what loosely coupled program. So the reason why Spring framework was defined in such a way where only loosely coupled programs will be allowed. If it allows you people to have any kind of code that what you wish to write, if you start defining your code using dependencies, it consists of high failure rate because of there are a lot of dependencies in the program. If one fails because of this dependency, the other will fail. Whereas in the case of this no dependencies because of everything is independent as there is no dependent. Okay. Even if one component fails, the other project works pretty fine. That's the reason. The piece of code where you don't have dependencies will be called as loosely coupled. The piece of code where you have dependencies will be called as tightly coupled. Whereas this remains same in the case of application. The place where you have dependencies will be called as tightly coupled application rather than program. In the similar way, the place where you don't have any dependencies, you will call it as loosely coupled application, which is the best one based on the knowledge that what you have acquired so far. It's very good to have a program or an application which is of loosely coupled. So, so Spring wants to design like Spring allows developers to have a programs which are only loosely coupled programs. Spring don't allow a developer to have any program which is tightly coupled. So you need to understand when a program is called tightly coupled or when a program will be called as loosely coupled. So I'll write a small example. You can refer to many examples in internet whenever you get a time. If it is a physical classroom, we'll give around some 15 to 20 minutes of time for students to look into several examples to understand when a program will be called as a loosely coupled program and when a program will be called as tightly coupled program. I'll write an example for a tightly coupled program. For a tightly coupled program, what do you mean by a tightly coupled program? I can call this in such a way where the program is having dependencies. I'll write an example in such a way where you'll have a dependencies in that program. Later, I'll write the same program in a loosely coupled manner so that you can understand how you need to write a program so that you never have a dependencies. Assume that I have two classes. One is employee class and the next one is address class. And I'll assume in such a way address is a part of employee. So I'll define a class with a name saying as what? Employee. Okay, fine. Then what I'll do, I'll have one constructor within this employee. Okay, so I have a constructor. You know what is a constructor, and you know how to define a constructor too. Now assume that this is a class that what I have. As of now, it is not independent, not depending on some other class. Is it clear? I'm taking this example by considering two classes. One class is called employee class, and the other class is called address class. And I want you people to understand now under this particular class, if I'm using the other class, what is the other class name? Address, where I'm creating object for this saying as ADD in order to maintain the address of every employee. So what is happening here indirectly? Where address is a different class. Right now, this is a class where employee class is depending on this address class, whereas address is also a part of employee class. Is it clear? Whenever I start creating an object for this address class, which is completely a different class, as a part of employee class, I can say right now where employee and address class are depending on each other in order to maintain the address of an employee. So whenever there is a dependency, I'm taking a small example to make you an understand of what these dependencies are. Now I can call this program as a tightly coupled program. Is it clear? So the above code is an example of having dependency which refers to a tightly coupled. Is it clear? And how a same example can be written in a loosely coupled too. Is it clear? So I'll write the example where the same example I'll write by making this as a loosely coupling program. So loosely coupling program, what do you mean by a loosely coupling program? As I clearly said right now, the program where you don't have any dependencies. So no dependencies. And I'll take the same two classes again. What are the two classes I have? One is employee class and the next one is address class. I'll start writing the program in order to give the same meaning where every employee need to maintain an address. But I'll write the same program in a bit different way so that this will not have any dependencies. So I have a class employee, that's the way how I have earlier. Then I'll define a constructor inside this class and you know how to define a constructor and you know the properties of a constructor too. So I have an employee class. Now earlier what I have defined, I have start defining an object to other class itself. Rather than creating an object to other class, making employee and address are depending on each other, I'll use that particular address object as one of the parameter of this class. So what I'll do, I'll use this address object with, where I'll use this ADD as where I'll create an object called ADD, which I'll make it as an object to a class called address class. Right now, it is not permanently depending on an employee class. Just I'm using this particular object as an argument to this constructor. So how I can provide an address to this? Whatever I'll get into this add, I want this to be provided this to be available in this particular add object. So I'll call this as this dot add equals to add. So earlier I'm creating this as an object to a separate class, and this class is right now depending on this. But whereas right now my employee is not depending on this, just I'm using this add as one type of argument to my constructor in order to maintain the address. So you understand how a program consisting of dependencies can be written in the way how the same program will not have any dependencies. Now this program will be called as what? A loosely coupled program. What I mean to say, a program which you don't have any dependencies compared to the way how you write earlier. So what you understand this from this, I'll write a note. I want you people to understand Spring Framework was designed in such a way it will not allow you people to write any program which consisting of dependencies because of what happens if the program is having dependencies where the failure rate is much because of one is depending on the other. If you have the program where you start writing the program as a loosely coupled program, there is very less chance, in fact, minimal chance in order to fail your program. So I want you people to understand to write a note. Spring Framework does not allows does not allows you to write a code which is tightly coupled. Now the next point, as everyone came to know right now with the example that what I discussed, spring the final conclusion is because of if you have dependencies as the failure rate is very much. Spring Framework was designed in such a way it will not allow any user to define a code having dependencies. So Spring does not allows you to write a code which is tightly coupled stating that having dependencies. So what we need to do? So we need to convert the tightly coupled code into loosely coupled code. How can we convert? Just by removing dependencies. So my final point to conclude what is dependency injection is. So we need to convert because the Spring does not allow tightly coupled program. So we need to convert what? We need to convert tightly coupled program into loosely coupled program. Tightly coupled program into loosely coupled program. How can I convert? I can convert this by removing dependencies. If I remove dependencies, obviously tightly coupled tightly coupled program can be called as a loosely coupled program. Now, how can I remove these dependencies? Because of I need to convert tightly coupled program into loosely coupled program. I need to remove these dependencies. I want you people to understand dependencies can be removed using whatever I kept on reading right now, saying as what? Dependency injection. So everyone from the session understand why I need to have a dependency injection. I'll conclude in such a way. I need to have a dependency injection in order to remove dependencies. Why I need to remove dependencies? If I have dependencies, my program is tightly coupled, but my Spring allows which program? Loosely coupled. Why my Spring allows loosely coupled program? Because of uh, the failure of an application is very less if I don't have dependencies. So Spring was designed in such a way it will never allow any user to have a program which is tightly coupled. That's the reason why I need to remove. So you need to understand how I can how why I need to remove these dependencies. Using what I can remove? dependency injection. There are two ways in order to remove these dependencies too, which I will make you understand after a while, because of now you understand what is a dependency injection, where you are writing point by point by a clear explanation of every point. Now I want you to understand what are the advantages of this dependency injection too. So advantages of DI as a sub part of whatever we are discussing. As I told, the first advantage of dependency injection is because of the uses of dependency injection is to remove dependency. It makes the code as a loosely coupled, makes the code loosely coupled. Even though the code is tightly coupled, this dependency injection will remove dependencies. That's what you studied just now. So it makes my code loosely coupled. Why it has to be loosely coupled? Spring allows only loosely coupled. Why Spring allows loosely coupled? If the program or application is loosely coupled, there is no chance where your application is getting failed. I hope you understand my first one. I already wrote what is the purpose of dependency injection just right now. It is easy to maintain as well as test. So right now, whenever you design application using the Spring framework, what I mean to say, where the code looks like only loosely coupled code, it is easy to maintain and test. These are the two advantages of dependency injection. It is easy to maintain and test. Whenever I go to an example, I'll start writing examples in order to understand the same knowledge that what you acquired so far or what you are acquiring. I'll make you understand how to keep this knowledge in order to start defining your own programs or applications. Now I told dependency injections are used to remove dependencies. Your next attempt to understand how many types of dependency injections are there in order to remove these dependencies. So your next subpart is types of dependency injections. There are two types of dependency injections which helps to remove dependencies. Your first one is setter injection and your second one is dependency injection. Your second one is what? Dependency injection. Using these two, I can remove dependencies. Your first one is setter injection. Your next one is dependency injection. So what these two are? These two are the different type of dependency injections. Why dependency injection? To remove dependencies. Why to remove dependency injection? In order to make sure my application is not getting failed. What do you mean by having dependencies where your program is tightly coupled? I need to convert it into loosely coupled. I hope everyone from the class got a complete idea on what is your dependency injection. In order to implement this dependency injection in my Spring program or in my Spring framework, I need to have an inversion of control, which is your next topic. Keep your next topic as an heading, saying as inversion of control. It is the simplest one where you'll understand in a much easiest way. Before I start writing a point here, I'll make you understand what is this inversion of control. I'll wait another 1 minute of time for you people to look into whatever you wrote from dependency injection and try to understand what is the purpose of dependency injection in a single line. The purpose of dependency injection is to remove dependencies. You need to understand why you need to remove dependencies and how the code looks when it is consisting of dependencies and it don't have dependencies. What is the advantage of having a code without dependencies? So whenever you have an advantage of code without dependencies, you need to understand how to convert it. And I told that you can convert using dependency injection. How many ways I can able to do that? I can remove dependencies one way using setter injection and one way using dependency injection. Just I'll give you 1 minute of time to have the rough understanding of what I have discussed so far. Then I'll go to the next topic called inversion of control, which is the small topic in fact, where you need to understand what is the purpose of this inversion control. Then we'll look into different examples. Then we'll start writing uh, some basic examples based on the knowledge that what we acquired from Spring Framework. Is it clear? So I'll wait for 1 minute of time. Make sure everyone is referring to this. And the next one is inversion of control. See, this plays a key role in our Spring framework in order to remove dependencies. Even though you understand and you came to know by this time, dependency injection is useful to remove dependencies. In order to inject dependencies or in order to implement this dependency injection, I need to have inversion of control, IOC. So I can define in such a way this IOC is responsible to inject dependencies. Why I need to inject dependencies, sir? Only if I inject dependencies, I can able to remove my dependencies. And you understand why you need to remove the dependencies. So I want everyone to write down in Spring framework, IOC, which you are calling it as inversion of control, is responsible to inject the dependencies. Inject the dependency. Why I need to inject the dependencies? Dependency need to be injected in order to remove the dependencies. So write down your next one. In Spring Framework, this particular IOC container is responsible to inject the dependencies. Dependency, we need to inject dependency in order to remove, dependencies. In order to remove dependencies. So I hope everyone understands in the simplest way what is this. In order to implement this dependency injection, either of the way, I need to have a IOC container in the example which I'm going to write. So this IOC is responsible to inject the dependencies where the reason why I'll inject the dependencies to remove the dependencies. Sir, how many IOC containers are available which is responsible or which helps to inject the dependencies? So write down the different types of IOC containers. So types of IOC containers are types of IOC containers are one is bean factory. You'll understand about all this in detail, which is a single word, which is a container name. And the next one is application context. Again, which is a single word where A and C are capital. These two you have different IOCs. Earlier, people used to use an IOC container for bean factory. Nowadays, it is outdated. People are using application context. Tomorrow, after a couple of years, by the time you step into industry, this IOC container may be updated with a new patches. You need to understand. Today, if you understand what purpose this IOC container is, how to use this IOC container and all, tomorrow, even though it is getting updated with a new, our responsibility is to just know the syntax of implementing this in a Spring framework because of you understand why I need to have an IOC container, for what purpose I need to use this set. Is clear. This is what your inversion of context. Now I'll start writing few examples on the Spring framework, in order to make you all understand how to remove dependencies or how to inject dependencies. Is it clear? So the examples which I'm going to discuss right now are basic way of designing a Spring application or a Spring program where that never interacts with a database. I'm not talking anything with respect to database. I'll write few programs and I'll execute even. I may write 3 or 4. I'll execute one program for you people to understand what exactly how it is happening. Is it clear? So I want you people to understand the way of implementing a small Spring example or a Spring application where this application will not interact with a database. If it has to interact with a database, I'll teach you Spring DAO after a while. This is the basic way of writing a Spring. Okay. As a first part, I'll teach you the basic way of writing programs in Spring Framework or the basic way of designing applications using Spring. Then in the second part, I'll teach you how to make your Spring application to start interacting with a database. In the third phase, I'll teach you how to design a web application using this Spring. So the examples that what we are going to write right now are the basic examples. So write down your next concept as spring examples. Spring examples. Before we start writing few examples, I want you people to make a note. These notes will help us what we are trying to do. Where you need to understand the examples what I'm going to write right now. You need to understand what are the different components of spring framework below. So write down the different basic spring framework. Basic spring framework. Framework must consist of must consist of must consist of following files. Must consist of following files when you implement. What are the files you need to have? Earlier at the time when you design, when you want to build any application in Hibernate or when you want to write any program in Hibernate, you know that your Hibernate must have minimum of 4 files. The first one is Pozo class, your second one is configuration file, your third one is mapping file, your last one is logic file. In the similar way, for basic Spring framework, the following files must be mandatory. The first file is bean class. Earlier we called the class as a Pozo class. Right now we are calling this as a bean class because of in Spring everything will be based on a bean. Bean is nothing but an object which you have studied during your enterprise program. Then I'll then you need to have a mapping file. No need to have a configuration file. It will understand. Then you need to have a mapping file where it looks like a mapping file, which I want you people to understand, but you need to call it as a configuration file. Sir, what you are trying to convey here, I hope you know that during your Hibernate, you will have both the files. One is configuration file, and the next one is mapping file. What you will have in configuration file during your Hibernate, your configuration file will have three things with respect to your Hibernate. It defines database properties, it defines Hibernate properties, it defines all the mapping sources. What mapping file will let you know during your Hibernate which Java object has to interact with which table. I hope you know all those. Is it clear? Now I want you people to understand what in the case of this basic Spring example, the file that what you are going to define, it looks like almost a mapping file where you understand by looking into that mapping file which bean object has to interact with which table of a database, but still I need to call it as a configuration file. Is it clear? So fine. The next one is the way how you define a logic for file for Hibernate. I'll start defining a logic file for my Spring 2. And then I'll write one more note. The way I'll write one more note where you'll understand how to design an application or how to build a project which is this Spring to be get executed. That is your note 2. If I understand these two keynotes, then I can easily able to write any program. My first note, what my Spring must have. One is bean class and the next one is configuration file. It looks like a mapping file. If you have a good knowledge on Hibernate, then and the next one is logic file. Okay, I'm going to define these three files where this note let you know the steps to start creating a project of your project based on a Spring framework. Anyway, even though I'm writing here, I'll make you understand all this by executing things on your IDE too. But before we start moving there, we need to understand how to do all this. Maybe you followed all these steps during your Hibernate. You may understand the first step where I expect everyone to create a Maven project. Create what? Maven project by choosing archetypes as quick start. By choosing archetypes as what? Quick type. Archetype as quick start of version 1.4 recommended of any version is quite okay. That is what your step 1 is. I'll show you all these steps even while I'm creating your first application in Spring. First, we'll understand everything here, then we'll there. Okay. So first step is to create a Maven project. Your second step is actually comprises of two things. One is to update Maven compiler. Update Maven compiler. Update Maven compiler from 1.7 to 1.8. I'll show you all these on our IDE too. Don't get worried if you are, don't get panic if you are not aware of anything. Update your Maven compiler from 1.7 to 1.8. The step which is very important, where I need to add dependencies in order to detect all my Spring terminology. So add dependencies. The dependencies which I expect you people to add is, one is Spring Core, and the next one is Spring Context, and one more is Spring Bean. I'll share all these dependencies at a later stage to all people when we start writing examples. Step 3, once you made any changes, you need to update your project, which is a Maven project. Once you're done with this step 4, the step 5 which you need to do is where you need to create a new directory, naming it as resources. Do you know where to create this? You will have a folder called src. Under that, you will have a folder called main. Now right click on the main, go to an option called what? New. Create a folder where the folder name must be resources. Why I need to have this folder, sir? This is the folder where I need to maintain all my configuration files and logic files, which you'll understand. Whenever I start doing things, I'll make sure I'll show these steps step by step, and I'll create a project file. And what is your step 5? This is the place where I need to implement my Spring topics or Spring concepts. Implement Spring concepts. In order to have a basic Spring example to be demonstrated, what are the three classes I need to define? Bean class. So this is the place where I'll create a bean class. This is a place where I'll have a configuration file where I'll define configuration file. Then I'll make you people to have a logic file too. Then your last step, which is step 6, where you understand how to execute your Java application, where you know that just run your Java application, run your .java file where you have a main method. So run your .java file where you have a main method. Make sure just run as this as a Java application, because of it is a console application where you are not going to run anything on a web server or anything on a local host right now. So just I'll run it as a Java application. These are the steps which I need to follow in order to build a project based on a Spring framework, and in order to execute too. I'll show you all those. Don't get worried. I want you people to understand. I want you people to understand the process or the procedure which everyone has to follow in order to feel very comfortable to start working with this Spring framework. So I hope you people made a note everything whenever I keep on teaching. The people who feel bit difficult in order to follow because of time constraint, I may be a bit fast, but I keep on explaining point by point on a deep note for you people to understand for a long time. So make sure if you are not able to follow any point, unfortunate, you'll have the recording of this same which you can refer at a later stage. Because of I understand two important notes to work with Spring examples. One is what files I need to define, and the other one is in what way I need to proceed. Then I'll start going with examples. I'll write 4 examples in order to demonstrate a concept called dependency injection and IOC controller. So write down the list of 4 examples which I'm going to teach, or which I'm going to make you understand. 4 examples where all these examples are based on what? The topic called dependency injection and inversion of control. So the 4 examples are, my first example is where I'll teach you setter injection, because of I told that a dependencies can be injected using 2 ways in order to remove dependencies. One is setter injection and the next one is constructor injection. And in order to implement these injections, I have how many containers? 2 containers. So I'll make you understand how to use your setter injection using what is your first container? Bean factory. And what is the next one? And I'll make you understand how to implement this injection called setter injection, not using IOC called bean factory, using another IOC container. What is an IOC container? Which is responsible to inject dependencies. These two are responsible for injecting dependencies. In how many ways I can inject dependencies? One is setter and the next one is constructor. And why I need to inject these dependencies? To remove dependencies. Why I need to remove dependencies? So my tightly coupled program will be get converted into loosely coupled program. Why my program must be a loosely coupled program? So that my application works pretty fine without any kind of errors or any kind of uh, hiccups. Okay, fine. What is the next one? Constructor injection. So your next one is constructor injection using what? Bean factory. Constructor injection using bean factory. And in the similar way, I'll teach you the same constructor injection. Constructor injection. Constructor injection using what? Application context. Using application context. So these are the four examples which I'm going to teach to you all people. So I want you people to have one by one. We'll write all the four examples. Is it clear? What is our first example? I'll write in a shortcut way. Implementing setter injection using bean factory. And I hope everyone knows that in order to implement a basic Spring example or a basic Spring application, how many files I need to define? You understand your first note where I need to define how many files? Three files. Bean class, configuration file, as well as logic file. So we got the complete picture. Okay, what files I need to define. Sir, in order to design an application, what steps you need to follow? You need to follow all these four steps, which are mandatory and which I'll follow to whenever I start showing things on an IDE. But what you need to understand, all these are the common steps anyway you'll understand whenever we start working on IDE. This is the anyway you know how to run an application. This is what you need to understand. This is what I'm concentrating on right now. So where you understand how to implement this bean concept. So first one, what I need to create. I need to create a bean class. So keep your heading as bean class. And what I'll name it as, this bean class, I'll name it as some example. Let us take an employee.java. So my base class, I'll name it as employee.java. Where I need to have this file in a directory called Java directory, where you'll have the directory path as src slash main slash Java in your project structure. You'll have a package there. Inside on the top of that package, you need to create a class where the class is employee.java. What is a bean class, sir? It almost looks like same as the way you let your poser class. Sir, what is setter injection? What do you mean by setter injection? I want you to understand. Setter injection is nothing but implementing setters and getters methods for every data member that what you have in a class. So now I need to create a bean class. So I'll have a class with a name saying as what? Employee. So I defined a class with a class employee. Assume that I have this class with the three properties by making access specified private by default. Even though you don't define by default, it will be a private. Assume that I have an access specifier called private. And I'll have a data type int in order to maintain employee ID. Then I'll have one more data member which is of type string in order to maintain employee name. Then I have one more data member where I'll call it as double in order to have an employee salary. So what is setter injection, sir? I want you people to understand. Setter injection is nothing but, see, this is not the code which you need to write. In fact, just I'm letting you know, generate what I need to have, setters and getters. Whenever I generate, I hope you have done the same in the Pozo class too. You need to go to an IDE, right click, go to source, generate setters and getters method. And how many methods it will be generated? One setter and getter for employee ID. Setter method is used to set an employee ID value. Getter method is used to get an employee ID. To set an employee name, setter method. To retrieve an employee name, getter method. In the similar way, to set an employee salary, setter method. To retrieve an employee salary, getter method. So for every data member, you'll have two methods, one setter, one getter method. All together, you'll have six. So whenever you generate these setters and getter methods, this particular bean class right now will be called as a class which is implementing setter injection. So I hope you understand the first part. What do you mean by a setter injection? I hope it is clear to everyone from the class. So now what I need to define, because of I done with a bean class, I need to define what? I need to define configuration file. So keep your next heading as configuration file. See this file, whereas in the case of Hibernate, everyone must define this file with a standard name saying as hibernate.cfg.xml. Whereas in the case of Spring, it's purely a developer or a user choice to name whatever you like. But in order to maintain a uniformity and in order to recognize stating this as a configuration file, I recommend everyone to keep a name saying as spconfig.xml representing Spring configuration file. But it's your choice. You can have your own name. Every mapping file and configuration files must have what? A DTD. I'll say this DTDs to you all people via a chat window at a later stage or via some kind of platform. But you know what is the purpose of this DTD? Configuration files and mapping files must have this document type definition. DTD stands for document type definition. In order to recognize all your XML tags into an IDE which you are writing and so that it can be called as an XML file. So I need to have this DTDs. So everything whatever you want to represent use in this configuration file must be represented as a bean. So you need to have an open tag and close a tag for beans. Within this bean tags, everything must be represented as a bean. Sir, what is a bean here? Bean is nothing but a Java object. Everything, whatever you do using Spring or either Hibernate, because of these are ORMs, you do everything as an object. Like whatever you learned during your enterprise programming JPA, where everything is based on an object. So every object will be represented with a bean right now. So whatever you want to define, you need to define as a bean. This bean must have three different attributes. One is ID. ID can be of your own name because of it is what? An employee bean class. I'll call my bean as the empty bean. Sir, why I need to have this ID? Later at a logic file, if I want to refer to this bean, I can able to refer only this employee bean. Then I need to have one more attribute called name and one more attribute called class. Name I need to write. Name I need to define a value where this bean class is available. Where this bean class is available. Assume I have one package tomorrow. While I am creating com.klu, com.klu, then I want you people to understand some project name. Let it be the project is let us call this project as Spring DI. So the project name is Spring DI. That's all. What is class? I want you people to understand. You need to define where this bean class is existing. This is name of the project where the class is existing. Now I need to define where that is existing. Assume the package which I'll take during my creation at a later stage is com.klu. My project name is Spring to demonstrate dependency injections dot. What is the class name? The class name that what I have is employee. So I hope everyone understand. One is ID, and the next one is name, and the next one is what? Class. I hope everyone got some idea. Now I want you people to understand what I need to define inside this bean. Whenever I implement setter injection, the proper the tag that what I need to use within this bean must be only property. How many properties I need to have? Total three. One is for employee ID, one is for employee name, and the next one is for what? Employee salary. So I'll define three properties in order to define those three things. So my first one is property. Here I need to name each and every property. In the first case, my property is employee ID, which is my attribute for a property. My next one is employee name. My next one is employee salary. We'll execute all these programs on an IDE too. And once you understand how to execute all these programs on IDE, where we'll practice one, and you can able to do all the rest of the cases. And this is the place where I can define the values for these properties too. Assume that my employee ID is 311. In the similar way, my value is something any name, let it be ABC. These are the names which I will be abbreviated of. Value, let it be where employee salary is some 10,000. Very clear. So with this, I'm done with my mapping file where I can able to provide the values of all the properties that what I defined in my bean class using a property tag because of I implement setter and getter methods. I need to use a property tag. If I want to refer to this bean at a later stage in my logic, my ID is employee bean. Representing where this is existing in a browser, representing to which class I need to refer. That's what my mapping file is all about. If you are done with a mapping file, then I need to define one more file from my Spring, which is a logic file. So I'll wait for 30 seconds of time in order you people to understand these two files, how a bean class must be defined. When I call, a setter injection is implemented stating this, and then I want you people to understand this configuration file too. Once we're done with this configuration file, then I want you people to understand, we'll define our last file, logic file, because if I want to test this, just I'll call it as tester.java. You can call this with any name even. Is it clear? Once you understand this, I'll move to there. I'll wait for another minute of time for you to understand the code that what we wrote so far. So I'll start writing my logic file because of I want to name it .java. Obviously, my class name will be test. This is the class where I need to define a main method because of I start writing my logic. So you know how to define main method. So I'm defining my main method because of this is a simple Java program. I hope you know. So just right now I start defining my main method. And I hope you know the first thing that what you have done during your Hibernate where you have loaded your configuration file. In the similar way, I need to make sure my configuration file must be recognized here using two inversion of controls which I have used. One is Bean Factory and the next one is IOC. The first example that what I'm going to teach right now is Bean Factory using. Okay. So I want you people to write down here in such a way where I write the syntax using Bean Factory now. So sir, what is the syntax to implement bean factor? I need to use an interface or a container as a part of container saying as resource. For that, I'll create an object saying as r equals to new. The way how I need to define this as a class path resource. All these are the interfaces which I need to use. Where here I need to represent the configuration file that what we have defined. What is the name that what I kept? spconfig.xml. Sir, what you are trying to define here, sir? Just I'm trying to define here resource where I have my configuration file. This is a configuration file which I'm asking it to figure out the resource where exactly this is available, and it is pointing out with an object called R. Now I need to load this. In order to have this, I need to use what? The container called bean factory. For that, I'll create an object called bf equals to new XML bean factory is a method which I need to use in order to recognize this R. This is a syntax which everyone has to remember how to implement your bean factory. What it is, sir? I want you people to understand. The first line will speaks where the resource is. The resource is completely in a configuration file called spring-config.xml. So it representing the class path resource is available here. Where I'm making it to available with an object called R. I want you people to understand this wherever my resource configuration file is pointing right now. Because of I need to start injecting my dependencies. That's what I am trying to write a logic. I'm making this to be happen with the help of IOC container called bean factory right now. So my configuration file is pointing out because of this object R. So whatever I defined as a configuration file earlier, right now can able to detect with this. Now in order to access this bean, what I already created, I created an employee bean. So if I want to access this, I can able to access that using an object called bean factory object. So bf dot, I want to access a bean. So get bean of which bean I want to access. The bean which I named it as saying as employee bean. So what we are trying to write here. I want to access a bean which I was named as EMP bean. I want to access this bean. How I can access using employee bean. So I can access that using a method called get bean. I represent a bean name which I want to have. I can able to do that using an IOC container only. That IOC container is referring with BF. So BF dot get bean. I'll get one object into this because of everything will be treated as object. And I want you people to understand I'll use an interface called object where I'll create one object name to the same stating as OB. What I want to understand, what happening in this line. Can you explain in a bit clear way? Is it clear? See, refer to this. I created a bean earlier where it is referring with employee bean. I want to access this bean. How can I access? I have a method called get bean. So get bean of what is the bean I want to access? Employee bean, which I need to mention. And how I need to access this with the help of any of the IOC container, either application context or bean factory. So with the help of bean factory, I'm getting this. Is it fine? So what I'll get whenever, as I clearly told, every bean represents one object. With this, I'm getting an object. So because of I'm getting an object here, I want to store that it in a OB, which is of type object. So whatever I have in object, I want to have this in a new object which I'll create for the bean class that what I created. I have an employee. I'll create an object E. So whatever I have in OB, I want to make sure this is representing with a new object called E. I hope everyone is getting. I'm trying to access a bean, nothing but one object. I'm storing it in OB. And actually it belongs to an employee. Whatever I have here, whatever I defined here belongs to employee. So that I'm getting that from OB which I have temporarily stored and I'm making it is pointing out with E. Now my E can refer to all those properties that what I have, getters, setters and all. So whatever I want to display, I can display here saying as system dot out dot println. Whatever I can able to print, I can print. Suppose if I want to get an employee ID, E dot get EID, employee ID, I can able to get an employee ID. Then I want to concatenate this in order to get an employee name. So E dot how to get an employee name, get E name. So what it displays an employee ID, employee name. Then I want to also display this with along one more where employee salary E dot. As everyone knows, whatever you have accessed right now earlier pointed with object, then pointing out with E, then you need to refer with E. E dot, what is the next one? E dot get employee salary. So E sal. So what it displays, this system dot out dot displays, this will displays an output. What are the values I assigned using my configuration file? What are the values I have? 311. So it displays 311 ABC followed by 10,000 on a console, which will execute the same program at a later stage to see whether we are getting or not. With this, we are done with example 1. So I'll start writing all your examples. Your example 2 is what? Setter injection using what? Rather than using bean factory, what I need to use? I need to use application context. So I want you people to understand your example 2, where first of all, what I need to define bean class. Do you have any changes in a bean class? Will you change bean class? No. So what I'll write it as same as previous. The bean class which you already created, it will remain same. This is what I want you people to understand. This is using application context. And what is the next one? The next one is configuration file. How you name that as spconfig.xml. So configuration file. Will you make any changes? No, because of I want to just change my IOC from bean factory to an application context. So it will also remain same as previous. So I'll make it as same as previous. Then your logic file, which I'll name it as test1.java because of I already have one file called with the name test.java. What I'll do, I'll make this logic file as is in order to get the same output. So I have this logic file. So I'll copy this for one more time in order to just save time and you can understand. Here rather than test, I named it as test1. My entire logic remains same just to retrieve whatever I've given. Rather than this particular bean factory, now I need to use what? Application context. How to use this application context, sir? Now my IOC content is application context. For that, I'm creating an object called AC equals to new. Here it should be like I want everyone to understand. It is class path application XML application context. So class path XML application context. When we execute all these programs, even though I'm writing 4 examples, I'll execute 1 or 2 so that you'll feel comfortable to execute other 2. I'll not execute all the 4. I don't want to spoon feed everything. I'll make you understand the concept so that I'll be confident that you people can able to execute. Class path XML application context. This is the syntax which you need to remember. Followed by you need to provide your configuration file name spconfig.xml. Earlier, where first of all I made it as a resource object, then I provided that resource object in my bean factory object. Here it is a single line application context. For that, I'm creating an object is equals to new class path application context of this. I need to provide an XML file so that my XML file, that what I'm calling it as a configuration file, can be recognized. And even if I change my IOC container from bean factory to application context, because of there is no change in the logic which I wrote, my output remains same, stating as 311 ABC 10,000. For the first 2 example, what is the change? Here my IOC container is application context. What is the purpose of IOC container? To inject dependencies. What type of dependencies we are injecting? Because of same as previous, it is setter injection. Here my IOC container is bean factory. The 2 lines that what I was highlighted here, in the 2 lines and the single line that what I was highlighted here, are the syntaxes to remember how to implement my OSC container stating as bean factory and inversion of controls. So this, we are done with 2 examples. I'll write the other 2 examples. Because of time constraint, I may not able to complete the other 2 examples within this 10 minutes of time. We'll write our example 3 and example 4 in the next online session. After we write example 3 and example 4, we'll execute one example to see how we'll get an output so that you can able to practice all the rest of the examples. If I complete writing those 2 examples, I can conclude I'm done with 2 more topics saying as dependency injection and inversion of control in this particular lecture, where you understand the architecture of Spring dependency injection and Spring inversion of control too. Yeah, right now I'll come to your classes physically where it is located, just in order to get some feedback from you, like the way how I'm going and all. Is it clear? Just be in your class for the next 2 or 3 minutes of time. I request all the faculty, or at least the student who is listening to this particular session, I hope most of you people will follow. Just tell your faculty, as there is an existing of one Telegram group for the faculty, just to write the room name, classroom name where you are located. If you located in R&D block, I may not approach you. The people who are located in C block as well as M block, I want you to stay for 1 or 2 minutes of time so that I'll approach you. Just ask your faculty to drop a message to to in our Telegram group stating that where your room is located. That's for a day where we'll resume back again tomorrow with much more examples and much more better understanding of how to work with the screen framework. Thank you all.